Level 1. The Slave. You are born into a world that has already decided what you are worth. You stand on a stone platform in the midday sun, and strangers inspect you like livestock. Your body belongs to someone else now. You carry what they tell you to carry, climb where they tell you to climb, and you do not stop until they say so. The kitchen is your world. Fire, smoke, iron, and the smell of food. You will never eat at a table. You scrub until your hands bleed, then you scrub again. Before the sun rises, you are already in the fields. The soil is hard and dry and does not care that you are exhausted. Neither does the man on the horse. At night you return to a room with no windows and no warmth, and you hold a small wooden tag, your only proof that you exist, and you tell yourself this is not forever. They take you to the baths, not to bathe, to serve. You carry towels through clouds of steam for men who do not look at your face. The mine is darker than anything you have imagined. You descend each morning into stone and cold, and for a moment you are not sure you will ever see daylight again. They give you bread and thin porridge at the end of the day. You eat it on the steps outside the kitchen because there is no table with a place set for you. One morning a magistrate calls your name. You stand before him with nothing, no money, no family, no history that anyone has written down. And you wait for whatever comes next. He hands you a document, a small piece of papyrus that weighs almost nothing. But when you hold it, you understand that it is the heaviest thing you have ever carried. You are free. Level 2. The Freedman. You wear the pileus now, the small felt cap that tells every Roman who passes you exactly what you once were and exactly what you have become. You walk a little taller. You find a workshop. You learn a trade with your hands, leather mostly, and for the first time in your life, the thing you make with your hands belongs to you. You open a food stall. It is small and the margins are thin, and you wake before dawn every single day. But the coin you count at the end of it is yours. You pay a landlord for a room in an insula on the 3rd floor. It is noisy and it smells, and the walls are thin. It is the finest thing you have ever owned. On your first free afternoon, you sit on the steps of a temple and read. Nobody tells you to move. Nobody tells you to do anything. You sit there until the light fails. Rome lets you vote now. You stand among the citizens and raise your hand, and your voice counts the same as a man whose grandfather was free. Almost. You move from the workshop to a money-changing table in the forum. You learn numbers fast. Money, you discover, is the one language Rome speaks without an accent. For the first time in your life, you sit in a tavern not to serve but to drink. You order wine. You pay for it yourself. Nobody comes to take it from you. You join a collegium, a guild of tradesmen like yourself. They are freedmen, immigrants, working men. You have never belonged to anything before. It feels extraordinary. The day you hold the keys to your own home, you stand outside it for a long time before you go in. You have spent a lifetime getting to this door. Level 3. The Legionary Soldier. You enlist. They give you armor, a shield, a gladius, and a number. You are no longer a person with a past. You are a soldier of Rome, and Rome has plans for you. You march 20 miles a day, every day, in full kit. The Roman road beneath your feet was built by men like you, going somewhere like this for the same reason. At the end of every march, you don't rest, you build. Stakes, trenches, ramparts, gates. A Roman army never sleeps without a wall around it. You learn this on the first night. The testudo is the first thing they teach you that feels like survival. Shields locked above, shields locked beside. Inside it, you are not a man. You are part of a machine. You train against the wooden post until your sword arm gives out. Then you switch hands and train some more. A gladius is only as useful as the arm behind it. The first battle is nothing like what you imagined. It is noise and dust and the man beside you and the shield in your hand and one foot in front of the other. At night in your tent, you write a letter home on a wax tablet. You describe the weather. You describe the food. You do not describe the things you have seen. Payday comes. Silver denarii counted into your palm by a man who does not look at your face. You send half home and keep half. Rome runs on this bargain. They post you to the wall in Britannia. It is cold and gray and wet in a way that Rome never prepared you for. You stand your watch and stare north into nothing. When the campaign ends, you march through Rome itself in the triumph. The crowd roars. Flowers fall around your feet. For one afternoon, the city knows your name, even if it forgets it by morning. Level 4. The Centurion. They give you the transverse crest and the vine staff and 80 men. You walk along their line at dawn and you look at each one and you already know which of them will need watching. Discipline in a Roman century is not a concept. It is a practice. The vine staff is not symbolic. Your men understand this. So do you. The paperwork never ends. Duty rosters, supply requests, disciplinary records. You sit by your oil lamp at night and wonder if this is really what you fought so hard to become. But then the order comes, and you draw your gladius, and you put yourself at the front, not because you were told to, but because that is what a centurion does. You stand in the doorway of a burning village in a foreign country, and you feel nothing and everything simultaneously. This is what victory looks like. You learn to live with the view. The legate calls you into his tent and shows you the map. You are trusted now with information that will get people killed. That is the weight of the vine staff. They put a laurel wreath on your crest in front of the entire legion. Thousands of men cheer your name. You stand perfectly still and think about the men who didn't make it to this moment. Off duty in the bathhouse, you sit with other officers and say nothing about the campaign. You drink. You breathe steam. For an hour, you are not a centurion. You are just a man. One of your men dies in your arms on a muddy field somewhere in Germania. You hold his hand until he is gone. Then you stand up and give the next order. You stand on the road at sunset, Rome on the horizon, your century ahead of you. 20 years of this road still stretches behind you. You would walk every mile of it again. Level 5. The Tribune. The Senate chamber is larger than you expected and quieter than you feared. You take your seat among men whose families have held power for generations, and you remind yourself, so will yours. You stand in the Forum Romanum for the first time as a man of rank. Every building here is a statement. Every column is a claim. Rome is not a city. Rome is an argument. You attend your first real Roman dinner party. The food is extraordinary and the conversation is more dangerous than any battle you have survived. You eat carefully and say very little. They give you an aqueduct to oversee. 40 miles of engineered stone carrying fresh water to 100,000 people. You stand at the far arch and understand for the first time what Rome actually is. You speak on the rostra. Your voice carries across the forum and the crowd listens and you feel the strange, intoxicating weight of being heard by an entire city. Your seat at the Colosseum is close enough to see the sand. The games are more brutal than you remembered from the cheap seats. From here, you cannot look away. A senator invites you to his garden and speaks to you about politics for 2 hours while pretending to speak about philosophy. You understand every word he doesn't say. You stand on the balcony of your own domus on the Palatine and look out at Rome and understand that this view is the reward the city offers its most useful servants. You make the temple offerings that are expected of a man of your position. You are not sure you believe in the gods. You are entirely sure that Rome believes in them. A scroll arrives that changes everything. You read it once, then again, then you fold it slowly and call for your cloak. Someone has decided you are ready for the next step. Level 6. The Senator. The purple stripe on your toga is wider now. You take your seat in the Curia Julia, and the weight of it settles on you like marble. This is the room where Rome decides. Your morning begins before the city wakes. You stand at the doorway of your domus on the Palatine Hill and look out at Rome, and it looks back at you, expectant. In a private room with 2 other senators and a map, you discuss things that will never be said on the floor of the Senate. This is where Rome is actually governed. You stand at the steps of the Temple of Jupiter and look down at the city, and you understand, perhaps for the first time, that you have become one of the men who run it. The vote is close. Half the Senate is on its feet. You raise your hand, and you know that the number changes the history of a province 1,200 miles from where you are standing. They ask you to sit as a judge. A man's life rests on your interpretation of Roman law and your reading of his character. You take your time. You weigh it carefully. You decide. You watch the chariot races from the senator's section, and you realize that the man beside you controls the grain supply of 3 provinces. You have a quiet conversation about the weather. Every morning, clients come to your door. Freedmen, merchants, small landowners, people whose problems you can solve with a word or a letter. Power, you discover, is mostly paperwork. You spend an afternoon in the library of Trajan reading the records of men who held power before you. You are looking for patterns. You are looking for mistakes you can avoid making. Late at night in your garden, alone with a wax tablet and the sound of the fountain, you write down the things you know that nobody else should. Then you wonder what to do with them. Level 7. The General. You stand before 30,000 men in formation, and the silence of that many people waiting for you to speak is the most powerful thing you have ever felt. From the hill, you can see the whole battle. You can see the flank weakening before your officers can. You can see the mistake the enemy is about to make. You act on it. The campaign tent at night smells of leather and lamp oil and the particular anxiety of men who know tomorrow will be difficult. You study the map until you can see it with your eyes closed. You lead the charge yourself, not because doctrine requires it, but because 30,000 men need to see the red cloak moving forward before they believe the order is survivable. A king kneels before you in the dust and offers you his sword. You accept it slowly and you do not smile, because you have learned that the moment of victory is when the next war begins. Rome greets you with flowers and roaring crowds and a triumph down the Via Sacra. You ride through it and you think about the men you left in the ground to get here. They name you consul. You sit in the curule chair in the Senate and the fasces stand beside you, and you are, for this year, the highest authority in the Roman world. Use it well. At night in your campaign tent, you write your memoirs. Not for now, for later. For the men who will come after you and need to understand what this actually cost. You dedicate a temple to the city that made you. You pour the libation and say the words, and thousands of people cheer, and you think of the slave market and the boot camp and the long road. You stand at the edge of the empire and look out at the dark beyond the river. And you understand something that no map can show. The world does not end where Rome ends. Level 8. The Praetorian Commander. You command the only soldiers permitted to bear arms inside the city of Rome. 9,000 men. The emperor's personal guard. The most dangerous job in the most powerful city on earth. You stand behind the throne and you watch every face in the room and you make calculations that nobody else in the room is making. The emperor rules Rome. You keep the emperor alive. 3 senators meet with you in a private room, and they speak carefully about the future of the empire. You listen to every word and you commit nothing, and you leave and you make a decision. You inspect the cohort at dawn and you look at 9,000 faces, and you know that every one of them will follow your order before they follow anyone else's. That is an extraordinary thing to know. You move the emperor through the city in a tight formation, and the crowd presses close, and you count every face in it, and your hand never moves far from your sword hilt. There's a corridor in the palace at night where something happened that cannot be undone. You stand in it afterward, and the torchlight moves, and you understand now what this office truly requires of you. You address the Praetorian cohort in the barracks courtyard, and you say a name, a new name, and they raise their weapons, and in that moment you have made an emperor. History turns on your word. You stand alone in the throne room after everyone has left, and you look at the empty throne from across the room, and you understand something that very few men in history ever get to understand. A mission comes that requires absolute discretion and absolute capability. You take your best men, and you leave before dawn, and you do not tell anyone where you're going or when you will return. You sit alone at night with your armor half removed and a cup of wine you cannot bring yourself to drink, and you carry the weight of every decision this office has ever required of you. Level 9. The Emperor. You stand on the steps of the palace at dawn, and Rome is below you in every direction, and it is all yours. Every road, every temple, every life, and the weight of that is unlike anything that has come before. Kings travel months to kneel before you. You receive them from a throne, and you speak to them through interpreters, and you grant or withhold with a word. This is what absolute power looks like from the inside. Your empire stretches from the sands of North Africa to the forests of Germania, from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. Every morning, the problems of 70 million people arrive on your desk before breakfast. You raise your thumb in the Colosseum, and 80,000 people hold their breath waiting to see which way it turns. You understand now that this is not entertainment. This is governance by spectacle. You stand at the head of your legions at the Dacian frontier, and you look at the enemy kingdom, and you make the decision that will add another province to the map of the world. You dedicate a monument to Rome, and the crowd roars, and you stand before stone that will outlast every living person in the empire by 1,000 years. You built something permanent. Very few men do. In the early morning before the court assembles, you sit alone in the palace garden in a plain tunic with no guards and no advisors, and for 1 hour you are simply a man sitting in a garden. You press your seal into the wax of a decree, and in that single motion you alter the lives of hundreds of thousands of people who will never know your name was the last mark on the page. You visit the northern frontier in winter, and you stand on the wall in the dark, and you look out at the fires of the people beyond the edge of your world, and you wonder what they see when they look back. One morning you do not rise. The room fills quietly with people who love you, and people who fear you, and people who are already calculating what comes next. You close your eyes, and Rome continues without you. Level 10. The Legacy. Centuries later, someone stands among the ruins of what you built and tries to imagine what it felt like to be alive inside it. The stones are still here. The people are not. The Pantheon still stands. The oculus still lets in the same circle of light that it let in 2,000 years ago. Some things Rome built were simply too well made to fall. An aqueduct in Gaul still carries water across a gorge on arches built by men whose names nobody remembers. The water doesn't care. It just keeps moving. The road is still straight. It will be straight long after the empire that built it is a memory. Rome understood that the roads were not infrastructure. They were an argument. In the Great Basilica, the mosaic floor is still intact. Millions of tiny tiles placed by anonymous hands into a pattern that has survived every century that came after. You stand on the sand of the Colosseum floor, and 50,000 empty stone seats surround you in silence. Everything that happened here happened to people who believed it mattered. Most of it did. In the dark rooms of medieval monasteries, monks with cold hands copied Roman words onto vellum by candlelight. They didn't fully understand what they were saving. They saved it anyway. Trajan's column tells the whole story in stone. If you know where to look, you can find the soldiers, the bridges, the prisoners, the wars. You can find people who lived exactly the life you just lived. At night, the Colosseum is lit by moonlight, and it is the most beautiful and terrible thing the ancient world left behind. 800 years of empire. This is what it looked like when it believed in itself. This is where your story ends. Not in a grave, not in a document, not in anyone's memory, but here, on the highest hill of the eternal city, looking out at everything you were part of as the sun goes down on the world you helped build.